Up high, down low, too slow. The Daniel Natal Show. In 1651, English political philosopher Thomas Hobbes wrote his classic, Leviathan. In it, he writes about how various forms of government operate. Like Aristotle, Cicero, and Hegel, Hobbes believed that monarchy was the best pure form of government. Of course, he was aware of Cicero's advice to create a mixed form of government with three separate branches representing their respective pure forms of government, namely monarchy, aristocracy, and republic. To stave off their decay into tyranny, oligarchy, and democracy, Cicero suggested cobbling together a hybrid form of all three to retain the best aspects of each while tempering the worst aspects of each. In our country, the Founding Fathers abided by this advice and created a hybrid form of government with the presidency standing in for monarchy, the Senate substituting for aristocracy, and the House of Representatives being the stunt double of republic. In Hobbes's England, they did the same thing, with the king at the top, the House of Lords representing the aristocrats, and the House of Commons representing the republican form of government. Cicero was asked, if you couldn't have this hybrid form of government, which would be the best pure form, whereupon he answered, monarchy. Hobbes agreed. In Leviathan, he explained that in a monarchy, everyone knows who's in charge. The lowliest medieval peasant could look up at the castle on the hill and tell you who was running the country. In a republic, however, it becomes much more difficult because power can be obtained by almost anyone, so people are always jockeying for power all the time. This creates intrigues and power plays from political parties, assassinations, the rise of demagogues, etc. Because of the internal dynamics, writes Hobbes, the only time that a republic is at peace is when there's an external enemy. Only then will the infighting simmer down and the nation unify. This is why republics are almost constantly at war, comments Hobbes. When they're not at war, the internal divisions usually tear the country apart, which is what John F. Kennedy describes in his book, Profiles in Courage. He talked about how the United States nearly went to civil war 5 times before the official Civil War in 1860. There were constant power struggles and internecine fighting. Montesquieu kind of talks about the same aspect of republics in The Spirit of the Laws. He writes, an aristocracy can sustain the force of its principle if the laws are such that they make the nobles feel more strongly the perils and fatigues of command than its delights, and if the state is in such a situation that it has something to dread, and if security comes from within and uncertainty from without. A certain kind of confidence is the glory and security of a monarchy, but by contrast, a republic must dread something. Fear of the Persians maintained the laws among the Greeks. Carthage and Rome intimidated one another and were mutually strengthened. How singular. The more secure these states are, the more, as with tranquil waters, they are subject to corruption. Note his reference to the enemy of the Greeks, the Persians, being what kept the Greeks in line. Likewise with Rome. War with the Carthaginians kept them disciplined. The United States similarly had the Soviet Union, and when we did, we had to distinguish ourselves from their nihilism and materialistic atheism. So we put in God we trust on our money and one nation under God in our Pledge of Allegiance. We defined ourselves by our virtue and piety. After the Soviet Union collapsed, however, so did our ethics. We went from what Thomas Paine called America in common sense, a Christian Sparta, to an endless gay pride parade with hedonism and vice for all. Just as bad, we swapped out the foreigner as our enemy and changed it to our fellow citizens. Suddenly we were told that the alien was the dreamer, and the citizens were the deplorables. We allowed decay to set in, and shifted from a republic which protects individual rights to a democracy, which is all about mob rule. John Adams wrote, remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. It is vain to say that democracy is less vain, less proud, less selfish, less ambitious, or less avaricious than aristocracy or monarchy. It is not true, in fact, and nowhere appears in history. Those passions are the same in all men, under all forms of simple government, and when unchecked, produce the same effects of fraud, violence, and cruelty. When clear prospects are opened before vanity, pride, avarice, or ambition for their easy gratification, it is hard for the most considerate philosophers and the most conscientious moralists to resist the temptation. Individuals have conquered themselves. Nations and large bodies of men, never. Ralph Waldo Emerson said something to the effect that sometimes an enemy is better than a false friend. The enemy will tell you the truth about yourself. It may not be something that you want to hear, but once you do, you can confront it and fix it. A false friend, by contrast, is a flatterer. He never tells you the truth. Therefore, you have no lessons to learn from him. In fact, if you are doing something wrong or going down the wrong path, he will never shout out a warning to help you. America for too long now has been prey to flatterers, people who are not our friends. people who don't even provide the nutritive value of a good enemy. And by listening to these smooth talkers, we have been led down the wrong path, away from the Republic toward a democracy, away from God and towards crude materialism, away from virtue and strength and towards luxury and effeminacy. We live in a republic which by its very design is turbulent. It's purposely messy and inefficient with the goal of making it harder for a tyrant to acquire power. But the drawback to that fail-safe mechanism is that we have to be on guard to remember that in the absence of external foes, we don't start seeing our own fellow citizens as our enemies. Because otherwise, as historian Arnold Toynbee observed, civilizations die from suicide, not by murder. Participants who used the New American Magazine reported that they experienced 12% more muscle mass, 22% more smiles from attractive strangers, and a 72% reduction in cognitive decline. Check us out at thenewamerican.com.